What would you get if Michael Myers didn't wear a mask and Dr. Loomis was a priest? Well, you'd get something very similar to tonight's movie. Absurd. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. Absurd was directed by cult Italian director Joe D'Amato and stars George Eastman, who also wrote the script. Now, these two have worked together many times, most notably on Anthropophagus, which is also known as the Grim Reaper. The film was super successful for them in 1980, and they wanted to continue that success. They sort of killed off their main villain, so a direct sequel was out of the question. Think of Absurd as a spiritual successor to Anthropophagus. In some countries, they actually call Absurd the Grim Reaper too. Now, as stated in the beginning of this video, Absurd is heavily influenced by American slashers, most notably Halloween. The movie keeps some story elements in the dark, but expands upon others, and I adore the script. I think it does a decent job of dancing with the mystery. The movie starts with two men running. We have this big brooding fella being chased by this priest-looking dude. Eventually, the brute climbs a fenced-in house with big spikes at the top of the fence. Just as he reaches the spikes, the priest pulls the dude's leg, impaling him on the fence. Take no offense, because this next scene has guts. The brute walks into this house with a family, with his guts in his hand, and he passes out. Doctors pick him up and take him to get surgery. Now, after surgery is where things really get absurd.
It's absurd.
What is it?
Completely absurd.
What?
Recuperative powers like that simply don't exist.
Ah, so this guy's basically Wolverine from X-Men without the claws. He can't be put down for long because he heals at abnormal rates. We'll get into the downfall of this a little bit later. Police find that priest-looking dude around and oh, he actually is a priest. Neat. I guessed on that one. The priest is after the brute. Apparently there were church-funded science experiments done on the large man. He now has the power to regenerate, and the only way to kill him is by destroying his brain. So the reason that the brute is a bad guy is because that every time that he regenerates, his brain changes slightly, causing him to become more aggressive and less human-like. Okay, it's not explained 100% like that, but that's my interpretation. I believe the actual terminology used was that he can repair himself, but it's not a 100% replica, or something like that. The priest gives a Loomis-inspired speech.
But there is nothing of human left in him. He is creature of evil. The spark of God was smothered the moment the devil took possession of him.
The brute escapes the hospital and kills a nurse. Now here's the big difference between Absurd and something like Halloween. The gore here is outstanding and excessive. Everything is so brutal. Gorehounds will love this film. He escapes into the night until he stumbles upon the house from the beginning. The babysitter is in. She's babysitting the little boy and bedridden teenage girl. This house is huge, and eventually he finds his way inside the house and stalks them all. And if you don't think this film is enough like Halloween, just listen to the music.
Come here. Blitz.
I know, it's not exact, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were inspired by the Halloween soundtrack at times. And yes, it does steal some elements from Halloween, but Absurd is very much its own beast. I never mind when people use other films as inspiration. I get mad when major corporations do it and try to pass it off as original. When it's people who love the art, it's hard to get upset by it. Just look at The Evil Dead. It steals so many story beats from other films, but it makes it its own. Absurd is wildly gory, but it doesn't have any nudity. I know that some people care about that, but I was perfectly content with everything we're given here. It's brutal, and honestly, the killer's face does have some cheesy moments. A mask would have helped greatly to try to hide some of that human element. Now that's better. The film does okay with building tension, but it's missing that sharp cinematography that I expect with Italian horror cinema of this era. This film would have been amazing if Argento, Fulci, or even Michele Soavi directed it. Speaking of Soavi, he was actually the assistant director of Absurd. Apparently he worked for free and just loved cinema. He went on to learn from Argento and eventually directed The Church, The Sect, and my personal favorite, Stage Fright from 1987. I love Stage Fright. Soavi also acted in Absurd and was the biker who died. All in all, Absurd is a gory slasher film that wears its influences on its sleeve. Yes, you'll have rough English dubbing, and yes, logically, not a lot of the film makes sense, but it's rarely boring and was a pleasant surprise for me. Absurd is a pretty good time for slasher fans. And that's all I have for tonight. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe. Take care, everyone.